this.
This primary election may look a little bit different depending on where you live. That's thanks to this little thing we do every 10 years called the census. And it's queuing up a lot of questions. What does the fox say? Well, not much, but apparently she does a lot of biting. What does her victim say? Well, we're going to hear from a former Idaho reporter who is now needing rabies shots. We've seen how the pandemic has shifted how we think about when and how we do almost anything, including going to the library. It's now about meeting people where they are in order to get books into the hands of our youngest kids. It was nearly 2 years ago, the summer of 2020, when Ammon Bundy was arrested at the Idaho State House. Remember the infamous wheeled office chair rolling out to the waiting police car incident? Yeah, Bundy and his brood were protesting Idaho's COVID restrictions at the State House, and they refused to leave a hearing room. Well, Bundy was banned from the Capitol grounds for a year after that incident, not to mention being sentenced to 40 hours of community service by an Ada County judge. Well, a sentence Bundy said he served by basically running for governor. In a letter to the court, Bundy said he completed more than 1,600 hours of community service by traveling around the state, attending public events, and encouraging people to hold public officials accountable. That letter was printed on Ammon for Governor letterhead. But according to Judge Annie McDevitt, that service wasn't worth the paper on which the letter was written. And she held him in contempt of court today. She told Bundy, quote, "The whole point of public service is to give back to the community in ways that do not serve yourself. Clearly, working for your own campaign is self-serving work." Adding, quote, "You repeatedly violate lawful orders, I should say, to suit your own agenda," end quote. Well, Judge McDevitt gave Bundy more than community service this time around, sentencing him to 10 days in jail and a $3,000 fine. Bundy was taken into custody immediately, which made it seem weird when about 15 minutes later, this tweet went out about an event happening tonight Bundy was supposed to be attending. A meet and greet with he and Ada County Sheriff candidate Doug Trauble. Meet some neighbors, enjoy some refreshments, and see the vision of two freedom-loving candidates. Oh, the irony. Well, his parody account picked up on it a few minutes later. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend. I have a thing that came up suddenly. That's the parody account, by the way. Which also had us wondering, will that meet and greet have to be renamed, rescheduled, or relocated? Because I'm not sure the Ada County video visitation system can accommodate the requests, and besides, each inmate is only allowed 2 25-minute online visits a week. So Bundy will be in jail for the next 10 days and pay a $3,000 fine. Bundy's meet and greet tweet, by the way, was eventually deleted. Well, 'tis the season during an election year, otherwise known as campaign season. In less than 6 weeks, Idahoans are going to hit the polls for the May primary election. And those who have requested an absentee ballot start getting those sent to them in the mail this past week. And if you receive yours, maybe you have some questions about it, about the ballot itself, your district, or even your party affiliation. Over the next few weeks, we hope to answer as many questions as we can about the election, starting with a few today. One on voting districts and another on voter affiliation with a political party. Here's Joe Paris.
In 40 days, Idahoans will head to the polls to vote in the 2022 May primary election. Already, some voters are sending in their votes on absentee ballots, which leads us to a big question from John in Boise. John writes to us, "While filling out my early absentee ballot, at the end of the first page, I noticed candidates for District 22 listed. Since I'm in District 21, wouldn't that be illegal?" Great question. We went to Ada County Clerk Phil McGrain for insight on the possible mix-up.
Odds are they got the correct ballot. It's just that this is a year of redistricting.
Important to remember, Idaho just installed new voting districts as a part of the census process that we do every decade.
New districts were just put in place in the middle of March in terms of the data being updated. So this is all very new, and it was a race for all the county clerk's offices to get that information completed so we could mail out those very first absentee ballots.
To help verify the situation, we searched John's address in the helpful Find My Ballot search tool on the Ada County Elections website. There we confirmed McGrain's hunch about redistricting is correct. But McGrain says this is a great reminder. It never hurts to make sure all of your information is up to date.
One of the best things you can do is just feel free to check. So at adaCountyElections.com, you can actually look up your address, find out what district you're in, and see a sample ballot that you'll be voting on. So even before you head to the polls, or if you want to check to make sure the ballot that you see online is the one that you got in the mail, just to verify that, you can easily independently do that through our website.
Another issue a voter ran into this week, seeing the wrong party affiliation listed in the state system. Deborah let us know that she wanted to affiliate with the Republicans after being unaffiliated, but she saw on her record online that she was listed as a Democrat affiliate. So what do you do in this situation? McGrain says reaching out to the clerk's office is a great step.
We can easily look in the records. We keep track of everything. And yes, errors can occur. And so if it was a clerical error on our side, we can fix it. We can even fix it while a voter is present at the polls and get that adjusted.
Deborah in the clerk's office came to the conclusion that it simply was a mistake that has since been fixed. There are receipts, so to speak, on all transactions someone has with the clerk's office. So if a mistake is made, it is easy to double check the receipt. It's just as easy also to refute claims made by voters who may have missed a deadline.
If someone swears by it, we'll be able to go back through the records and we can fix it if we can find the record. But just somebody asserting that, I've been a lifelong X, Y, or Z isn't sufficient. We actually do have to have the paper trail. And for everything, whether it's voter registrations, party changes, election history, we keep track of all those records reflecting people's participation.
Well, kudos to them for getting these absentee ballots turned around in a short amount of time, having to change with all the redistricting and everything. So that is great. But now we want to talk about the voter affiliation. And that deadline, we know, passed on March 11th for anybody that wants to, say, vote in the GOP primary but was registered as a Democrat or whatever. Yes. But unaffiliated, how does that play out?
Let's clarify this here once and for all, because if you are currently an unaffiliated voter, meaning you've never been with the Republicans or Democrats, or you decided to unaffiliate, then you are able to change your affiliation at the polls. Again, this is only for unaffiliated voters. If you're already a Democrat or a Republican affiliation, it is too late. The March 11th deadline has passed. Now, Brian, you and I were talking in the newsroom this afternoon with our producer, Danny, and we were talking about the legislation that could have been passed in the State House that would have made some big changes. I'm not going to bring them up because it'll make the whole thing confusing, but what you need to know, if you're an unaffiliated voter, you can change your affiliation up to and on Election Day in Idaho. If you're already registered, you're out of luck.
If you'd like to vote in the Democratic primary, you could be registered as a Republican, but you get the Democratic primary ballot.
Right.
But if you want to vote in the Republican primary, you have to be registered as a Republican.
Correct. And you can only get one. So if for some reason you wanted to vote in multiple, too bad. You got to pick one based on your affiliation.
Totally easy to understand. Thanks, Joe.
You got it.
All right, going back to this affiliation and how many people have changed theirs and whatever. With Idaho's GOP primary closed, as we talked about, meaning only registered Republicans can participate in it, we heard a lot of chatter over the last few months about people planning to switch their affiliation to be eligible for the May primary election. The idea, or the fear, depending on your perspective, was Democrats were going to jump in to try to influence who will end up as the Republican choice come the general election in November, since this year is a highly contested campaign on the Republican ticket. But has that actually happened? Well, we talked to Phil McGrain a few months ago, who says, yeah, it does happen sometimes, but not often. But we decided to check for ourselves. We took a look at Ada, Blaine, and Kootenai counties to see just how many voters have switched affiliations this year. As of yesterday, in Ada County, there were more than 297,000 registered voters. And there was a deadline of March 11th that we just mentioned for already registered and affiliated voters to change their affiliation. In Ada County, from February of last year, 2021, 4,390 voters voting Democratic then did just that. They switched to Republican. More than 5,000 who were unaffiliated joined the GOP ranks as well. So there were about 9,500 new members added to the Republican rolls in Ada County. And there could be more come Election Day because, as we mentioned, since unaffiliated voters can register as Republicans at the polls on Election Day. In Blaine County, considered one of the bluest in Idaho, there are a little more than 15,000 registered voters. Between November and March, 170 voters switched their affiliation from Democratic to Republican, which brings the total number of newly registered Republicans in Blaine County to 402. Kootenai County, the Coeur d'Alene area, there are more than 103,000 registered voters, or at least there were as of January. Between November 3rd of last year to March 11th of this year, 353 registered voters changed their party affiliation from Democratic to Republican. So I guess, yeah, it has happened, turnover at least to some extent in Ada County, but in a much smaller percentage in Blaine and Kootenai counties. Just a reminder, You can register or request your absentee ballot for both the May primary and the November general election right now at voteidaho.org.
I was walking and the fox ran up behind me and clipped my ankle with its mouth.
What did you do after that?
I screamed.
As anyone would, right, when they find themselves the victim of a vulpine. We like to keep up with what's happening in Washington, D.C. here on the 208, especially if it involves Idaho. And this week, well, there hasn't been this much commotion on the Capitol grounds since, well, last January. You see, a fox was running around scaring people and biting them, apparently, including a congressman from California and former Idaho Statesman reporter Ammon Bundy, who you just heard screamed. Ammon moved to D.C. about a year and a half ago to cover politics for Politico. Well, this week, that fox was caught and euthanized and tested positive for rabies, which is unfortunate. But that also added a whole other level to Amon's story of being bitten by a fox while working at the U.S. Capitol. Well, we spoke with Amon today, who is one rabies shot into her 4-shot series, to get a few more details other than I screamed. Hey there.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you very much for doing this.
Sorry, I've done so many of these. It's just...
Have you really?
I was walking.
Between every local D.C. TV station,
Scary?
I mean, kind of, more confusing.
the Washington Post, the Idaho Statesman, NPR twice, and Politico, where she works, Ammon Bundy has been on the other side of the interview a lot lately.
Poverino.
All because of a red fox running around the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I had no idea.
Except there was an email sent out by the Sergeant-at-Arms on Tuesday warning about a fox biting people and the possibility of several dens on Capitol grounds.
I hadn't seen any of it on Twitter. I hadn't heard anybody talking about it. I didn't even see the email at that point. And then I found the fox when I was walking home.
No, it found you.
It did. Yeah, you're right. It did find me.
In the middle of the afternoon on Tuesday.
I was just walking home in like plain sight of everybody. And I feel the nip like on my ankle like that, like my leg was moving and it bit me. And I screamed incredibly loud. And I like whipped around and the fox ran in front of me and I took my backpack and I just like swung at it. So I thought it was gonna like jump at my face or something. Then I like turned to some people that were like maybe a block away and I was just like, it's a fox. Like I wanted people to know that I was screaming for a reason.
Of course.
And not just like screaming at a cat or something. Like I'm like, this is a fox. Like I was just barely like, it's right there.
Lucky for Jimena, people came running, some already calling Capitol Police.
So fortunately, like when people ran over, it kind of scampered away and then everyone kind of kept track of where it was going. So when animal control got there and they got the fox, they knew that that was the one that had bit me.
Jimena was the fox's 9th victim.
I think I was the last one that it got, and I think I was the worst one. It drew blood.
But it also drew attention to disease. Were you concerned at that point about any sort of repercussions from this other than the scratching and the bleeding?
Like if I had rabies?
Yeah, I mean, was that a concern from the beginning?
I think so. I think the first thing that I thought was, what am I supposed to do? Because a part of me for a second, I was like, do I just walk home? And then I was like, no, this is a fox. I should not do that.
She did, however, turn to Twitter, posting that feeling when you get bitten by a fox leaving the Capitol, because that's, of course, something I expect in the middle of D.C. Or pointing out she did nothing wrong. I'm from Idaho. I know to not try and pet it. And you're telling me I survived 3 years of a pandemic to be bitten by a rabid fox? So a year and a half you've been there, and now you're getting national attention for being bitten by a fox, which is pretty awesome.
It's not the worst thing that I could be getting national attention for. I will say, as a reporter that does what I think is a lot of meaningful work about agriculture and food and people's access to both of those things, I do wish that this national attention was maybe more about that than me being bit by a fox, but it's not the worst thing ever. So there is that.
She does a lot of good work on ag and food and stuff like that. Worth a follow on Twitter. Jimena says she's been getting text messages and phone calls from friends she hasn't seen in years. By the way, Jimena didn't just get a rabies shot, which came a day late because of a mix-up at the ER, but she also got a tetanus shot and 2 immunoglobulin shots, and in 2 days, she's gonna get her second rabies shot and a third and a fourth coming over the next couple of weeks. Wow, yeah, it goes in the arm, by the way, not the stomach. Like, we both were raised to think that's how they did it, and apparently they haven't done it like that since the 80s, so there's that. Well, the fox, unfortunately, did have 3 kits in her den, and they were also euthanized today because of their likely exposure to their mother. There's always time to dive into a good book, even in the middle of a load of laundry. Idaho's libraries are working to meet families where they are to help kids get more comfortable with reading. Go ahead and read that number that's on your screen. That's the number if you want to send us a text message, 208-321-5614. That's the number. Send us your questions, your comments. You can even complain about the show if you'd like, just as long as you keep it concise, clean, and clever. Oh, and make sure to include your name and the hashtag #the208. We might share yours at the end of the show. When it comes to literacy in young kids, the pandemic has caused some students to fall a bit behind. That's why the Caldwell Public Library is getting creative, finding ways for kids to learn in some unexpected but everyday spaces. Katya Stepovic shows us where families can get in some reading time while they're waiting for their clothes to get cleaned.
It's not necessarily the first place you would go for a good read.
This is the most people I've ever seen here.
Take it from Cloud Friedrich, who's been using laundromats for 30 years.
I'm doing some drying. I did my laundry yesterday, but I didn't plan my time well, so I had to come back and dry today.
Couples, families, grandparents, you name it. For a lot of people, a laundromat is kind of like a second home.
Well, normally I come in on Thursday mornings and there's not really a whole lot of families here. Kids are in school, but occasionally if I have to do something on a Saturday, then there's a lot of families.
But the Caldwell Public Library is trying something new in an effort to have families leave with more than just clean clothes.
We know that some are going to walk out the door, but we're hoping that they, for the most part, stay in place.
She's talking about books, the dozens of them that have greeted many families and children in the last 3 months at this Get the Funk Out laundromat in Caldwell. It's part of a pilot program called Laundromat Literacy, currently in 17 laundromats throughout the state.
During COVID, there has been a marked decrease, and we're hoping to get those numbers back up where Idaho typically has some of the highest per capita library use for families and circulation of children's materials. So yeah, we're hoping to get those numbers back where they were.
Stephanie Bailey White, Idaho State Librarian, says typically families spend 2 to 2.5 hours during every visit to a laundromat, and many of them bring their children. So why not make that time valuable for the kids?
We found through research that if kids aren't reading on grade level by the end of first grade, that there's a 1 in 8 chance that they won't catch up to their peers without costly direct intervention.
But this program is trying to keep young children from falling behind in the first place.
It's just really reaching those kind of hard to reach families who may not have grown up using a library, and sharing, that libraries are for everybody.
For Priscilla Crossley, a grandmother and bus driver in the Valley View School District, because of this, she's not planning on changing laundromats anytime soon.
I bring my grandchildren here when I take care of them. And so my oldest is 6, and so she loves the books.
And Brian, they do plan on continuing this program throughout the state. It's going to continue to grow. People are not encouraged to take the books, but they know that that might happen from time to time.
Well, I can't think of anything better to do than read while your laundry's spinning and tumbling and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great idea.
But the kids don't think that way. They're going to pull on your clothes and say, let's go, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what happens. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good idea. Thanks, Katya. All right, final minute or so of the show, and take a look at some of the comments you sent and some questions as well. A lot of questions about the primary election coming up in May, like this one. I don't understand why I have to be affiliated with a party to vote. If I want to vote Republican, why do I have to proclaim I'm a Republican? Why can't I just vote for them? And the same with Democrats. Why are we not allowed to vote with privacy? And that's from Brian, but that's not necessarily a privacy thing. But back in 2011, the Idaho State Legislature passed House Bill 351, I believe. And that basically said, after a lawsuit about a dozen years ago, that said that parties in Idaho can choose to close their primary if they so choose. It's an option. GOP decided they were going to close their primaries. Democratic side is deciding to leave theirs open. They could change that any time, by the way. Every 6 months prior to a primary, that party has to tell the Secretary of State if it's going to be open or closed. And since then, well, it's been closed for the GOP, open for the Democrats. And that's why we have to do it because, well, the GOP just wanted theirs closed. And so that's why it's not a privacy thing. It's just a matter of what ballot you get, because they figure if you're in that party, you should be able to choose those parties' candidates for the general election. So if I want to vote with my mind, meaning who I want in office, I have to choose a party. So what about the other parties, such as independent or constitutionalists, that are bidding for a vote? Well, for the first time in a long time, there are going to be an independent and a constitutional party primary this May. So pay attention to that. Awesome job, Brian. I don't know from whom or why, but I'm just going to keep that and read it every once in a while. See you tomorrow.